The old town of Hemlock Hollow was a place where shadows stretched a little too long, and the fog clung to the cobbled streets like a shroud. I'd come here chasing whispers, rumors of a darkness that had taken root deep within the ancient woods surrounding the town. As a paranormal investigator, or a fool, depending on who you ask, I was drawn to such places. My name is Elias, and this is the story of how I nearly became another one of Hemlock Hollow's ghosts. It all started with the disappearances. Every full moon, someone would vanish without a trace. The local sheriff, a tired man named Brody with eyes that had seen too much, just chalked it up to animal attacks. But the townsfolk knew better. They spoke in hushed tones of a beast, a creature of immense size and fury that stalked the moonlit paths. They called it the Howler. My investigation began at the local tavern, the Gilded Bat. The air was thick with the smell of stale ale and fear. I managed to get an old man, Silas, to talk. He was missing 3 fingers on his left hand, a souvenir from an encounter years ago. He told me the Howler wasn't just an animal. It was a curse, a man who became a monster. He pointed a trembling, 2-fingered hand towards the edge of town, towards a grand, decaying manor that loomed over the valley like a vulture. The curse, he rasped, it started with them, the Alacards, the Alacard family. The name sent a chill down my spine. They were the town's reclusive nobles, living in that Gothic mansion for centuries, never aging, never seen in the daylight. The townsfolk avoided them, their fear of the Howler matched only by their dread of the pale figures in the mansion. The connection was too obvious to ignore. A werewolf problem and a family of suspected vampires, all in one quaint, terrifying little town. My kind of party. That night, under the sliver of a crescent moon, I made my way to the Alacard estate. The grounds were immaculate, a stark contrast to the crumbling stone of the manor itself. A single light burned in a high window. As I crept closer, the grand oak doors creaked open. A woman stood silhouetted against the dim light inside. She was impossibly beautiful, with hair as black as a raven's wing and skin like porcelain. "We've been expecting you, Mr. Thorne," she said, her voice a silken melody that did little to soothe the frantic beating of my heart. She introduced herself as Eleonora Alucard. She and her brother Julian invited me inside. The interior was opulent, filled with priceless antiques and portraits of ancestors who all bore a striking resemblance to my hosts. Julian was as pale and striking as his sister, but his eyes held a cold, predatory glint. They didn't deny what they were. They were vampires, ancient and powerful, but they claimed they weren't the monsters I was looking for. "We are keepers, Mr. Thorne," Julian explained, his voice low and serious. "Not killers. We have maintained the balance in this valley for generations." According to them, the werewolf, the Howler, was not just some random curse. It was one of their own. A rival vampire named Casimir, who had sought to overthrow their peaceful rule. Centuries ago, they had defeated him, but not before he'd performed a desperate, forbidden ritual. He bound his spirit to the moon, ensuring that even in death, his rage would manifest. He couldn't be a vampire anymore. But every full moon, his violent essence would possess a new host, turning them into the mindless, raging beast that terrorized the town. The host is always someone with a trace of our bloodline, Eleonora added, her gaze filled with a sorrow that seemed centuries old. Distant relatives, unaware of their heritage. The curse seeks them out. The full moon was just 2 nights away. The Alucards needed my help. Their own vampiric nature prevented them from facing the beast directly. Something about the werewolf's bite being uniquely fatal to them. They had an old grimoire that described a counter-ritual, one that could sever Casimir's spirit from the lunar cycle and banish it for good. But it required a mortal hand to perform it. At the heart of the beast's territory, an ancient stone circle deep in the woods. I was skeptical. A truce with vampires to hunt a ghost werewolf. It sounded like a trap. But looking into Eleonora's eyes, I saw desperation, not deceit. And I thought of the missing people, the fear in Sheriff Brody's eyes. I agreed. The next 2 days were a blur of preparation. Julian and I studied the grimoire, a dusty tome filled with archaic symbols and chilling incantations. Eleonora gathered the necessary components: silver dust, wolfsbane, and a shard of obsidian that hummed with a strange energy. They taught me the words, the gestures. They warned me that the beast would be drawn to the ritual's energy, that I would have mere moments to complete it before it was upon me. The night of the full moon arrived. The air grew heavy, charged with an unseen electricity. A brilliant silver disk climbed into the sky, bathing the woods in an ethereal glow. Julian guided me through the twisted, thorny paths. Eleonora remained at the manor, her role to use her own power to create a mystical barrier that would hopefully slow the beast down. We reached the stone circle, a ring of moss-covered monoliths that felt older than the trees themselves. The air was cold, and the silence was absolute. To absolute. Julian gave me a final nod. Be swift, Elias. It will be here soon. He then melted back into the shadows, leaving me alone. My hands trembled as I laid out the components on the central altar stone. I began the incantation, my voice shaking at first, then growing stronger as I focused. The ancient words felt strange on my tongue, powerful. The obsidian shard began to glow with a faint purple light. Then I heard it, a howl that was not of this world. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated rage, a sound that ripped through the silence and shook the very ground I stood on. It was close. Branches snapped, trees groaned. A colossal shape burst through the tree line. It was larger than any wolf, larger than a bear. It stood on 2 legs, its body a horrific fusion of man and beast. Its fur was matted with dried blood, and its eyes glowed with a malevolent red light. Saliva dripped from jaws filled with teeth like daggers. This was the howler. This was Casimir's rage made flesh. It saw me. It saw the glowing obsidian. It let out another deafening roar and charged. Time seemed to slow down. I poured the silver dust over the stone, my mind racing through the final lines of the ritual. The wolf was a blur of fur and claws, closing the distance in heartbeats. I could smell the rot and death on its breath. Just as it lunged, its claws extended to rip me apart. I slammed my hand down on the glowing obsidian and screamed the final word of the incantation. A blinding flash of purple light erupted from the altar, throwing me backward. The beast was caught midair, frozen in the blast. It thrashed and howled, but the light held it fast. Dark, smoky tendrils were being pulled from its body, drawn into the obsidian shard. The creature began to shrink, its monstrous form contorting. With a final, agonizing shriek that echoed through the valley, the light vanished. The beast was gone. Lying unconscious on the ground where it had been was a young man, no older than 20. It was the bartender from the Gilded Bat. The curse had found its latest host. Julian emerged from the shadows, his face grim. He checked on the young man, who was breathing unharmed. "You did it, Elias," he said, his voice holding a new respect. "You have broken the curse." He picked up the obsidian shard, which now pulsed with a trapped crimson light. "Casimir is bound. He will trouble this valley no more." We carried the young man back to the edge of town, leaving him where Sheriff Brody would find him, disoriented but alive. My work in Hemlock Hollow was done. As the sun began to rise, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, I stood with Eleonora at the edge of the estate. "We are in your debt," she said, her usual melancholy replaced by a quiet gratitude. "You have a rare courage." I just nodded. I had faced down a monster and walked away. I had trusted vampires and survived. Hemlock Hollow was still a place of long shadows, but one of them had finally been lifted. As I drove away, leaving the town and its secrets in my rearview mirror, I knew this was a story I would be telling for a very, very long time. It serves as a reminder that sometimes the greatest monsters are not the ones with fangs or claws, but the echoes of rage left behind. And sometimes the only way to fight darkness is to stand with the lesser of two evils. Thanks for listening. If you enjoy Tales from the Edge of the Unknown, make sure to subscribe for more.